So I did some homework. I had 2 things left over from the video that I needed to do for the plotting. One of them was to create a mystery by asking questions, and the other was to try to get more details on what exactly happens in each of the changing points from the plot embryo and get more details on the plot basically. So what I did is I tried to get more details on the plot by using this whole Pixar method of basically having like a starting situation, you know, and then one day something happened. And then for each of the following points basically going, and because of that, this happened, and because of that, that happened. That was pretty hard to do. I didn't really get that much deeper into the story. I tried to tie into it, but the problem is that I don't really know what the fruit flies, the creature, the threats are, if you don't get that reference. Where have you been the last few videos? And that's the problem, because I don't really know what the fruit flies do and what they are. I don't really know how that affects the events in the human world and in the other world. And then I tried the other thing, which was trying to create mystery. And so basically what I did is for each of those turning points, I went in and was kind of like, so what does the reader know at this point, and what would be kind of like the guiding question that keeps them there, right? First question is basically the story starts and the reader asks themselves, okay, where are we? What is going on? Why should I care, right? That's kind of like the opening question. And then tying into that would be there are missing people. So that was kind of like a sub question. And from there, I really just did like question after question. You ask a bunch of questions and then I spread them out at what point the reader would ask them. It's not finalized yet. I think once I have the complete plot, I would still have to go through it and, you know, rearrange questions. When are they asked, and more importantly, when are they answered? I'm very happy with this kind of, at least now I have a sense of why the reader would care to read the story, because I'm starting to get a sense of how I would want to present the story, so it's not so obvious from the beginning, you know, the whole picture and what is going on, but making it a mystery. And structuring the questions for each of these turning points really helped with that. The next thing that is still left over is the subplot. For subplot, I want to look at a video from Vivien Reis. Here it's how to find ideas for your subplot. I do have one idea for a subplot, which is the whole chosen one element, because I still have to find the chosen one.
Everyone's telling you subplots, subplots, subplots. It often requires a lot of planning ahead of.
My main problem with the subplot here is not just what exactly is a subplot, but I already have 2 plot lines, and now I also have a subplot. How do I tie all of that together that it doesn't divert attention away too much and take away from each storyline?
Time in figuring out how to weave in a separate story into your main story without getting things confused, which makes it intimidating and causes a lot of writers to just outright avoid it. If they just so happen to write a subplot, then that's good enough.
I have a pet peeve, and I wonder if I'm the only one, but it always really annoys me when I watch Authortube videos, and I don't mean her in particular, I mean in general. When I watch a video on writing advice, it's always this general statement of a lot of writers do this wrong, or a lot of newbie writers, you know, kind of like always put off by that, because it's always kind of like presented in the way that it's, if you do it this way, it's wrong, and I'm going to tell you the right way. And I don't agree with that, because I always feel like when it comes to creating something from scratch, any kind of creative endeavor, there are both ways of doing it, because you can always subvert the rules and come up with something really cool that's kind of in the nature of creative work. So that's why it's a pet peeve.
Better understand the main character, their motivations, how they react in certain situations, what they think is important in life, their flaws. Subplots are side stories that help us get to know the protagonist a little more before the big bang happens at the end. A subplot has to have a beginning, a middle, and smaller, cuter plot. Cuter. Maybe not cuter, because they can get ugly. Just smaller. For this reason, it needs to have its own story
Basically, if I get it correctly, it means that you have a main plot, you have a conflict in the main plot, and then you have a subplot. The subplot ties into the main plot, and either in terms of conflict, character development, theme, or whatever other story element is relevant here, enhances the main plot, makes it clearer, ups the stakes, and the resolution directly plays into the conflict of the main plot and then the resolution of the main plot. And otherwise, if that's not the case, then it would just be a different storyline, taking away attention from the main storyline.
How do I come up with subplot ideas? Here are 5 questions for you to think about when trying to answer this question. More questions to answer a question that's totally not confusing.
I'm already confused, doesn't matter anymore.
What is your protagonist's relationship like with their family? In a lot of stories or books or movies that aren't dramas, there's not much focus on the family. There may be some focus on romance or spouses, but what about extended family?
Okay, now I'm completely confused, because how do I know that I'm not picking a subplot that takes away from the main plot if I'm just randomly going to look for them? Do you get what I mean? It's like, say I have like a story about a chosen one, right? And I want to add a subplot. So starting with family drama. If I now go and tell the family drama, he has a younger sibling and there's a rivalry. Jesus. He has a younger sibling and there's a rivalry between them. How do I make it so that this subplot is actually playing into the main plot? Where do I start with that? Because does she have like a method?
Number 2, is there a secondary antagonist to the main plot antagonist?
No. Okay, so those are just ideas where the subplot could come from in terms of actual things that happen, but not how do I construct it tied in with the main plot. What is the main plot here? Basically, we're in a human world, they are attacked by something, and then they have to flee into the past to save themselves. That is the main plot. What is the one thing that happens? It's the main conflict here is the attack by something that they don't understand. It's spreading all around their planet and the few survivors having to flee. So that's the main conflict, kind of like fleeing from being affected yourself. And then within that, there are 2 storylines. There's 2 ways the humans are trying to deal with that. One is that they're going into the other world to get more information on what is attacking them so that they can fight it. And the other is they are still in their world, trying to fight back, trying to save people who have been affected, and then trying not to get affected themselves. So with those are 2 storylines that play into the overall conflict of how the humans are trying to deal with that overall conflict. And now what I do know definitely is that the subplot would happen in the human world plot line, because I like the idea that the chosen one in the future storyline basically is just a normal person who is immune to being affected himself. So that's why this person becomes important, because so far they don't know what is attacking them and how it works. So having someone who is immune could be the key to figuring that out. So that's why it makes sense that this is a civilian, and if it's a civilian, then that person would not have gone into the other world. So subplot happens in plotline 2, I know that. And now for plotline 2, the question is, what is the main conflict there? So final showdown happens at 8, where basically the humans have now acquired the time travel and are leaving the future to escape into the past. And the idea here is basically that you have like a few people who make it back into the post, and it's like this, you know, running out of time, just having to try it, and a few actually make it back into the post, kind of like countdown effect. So that's the final conflict, making it back into the post. And before that, you have the two storylines coming together of the ones who were off planet coming back, and the others who had to survive in their own world, who figured out there's someone immune, sharing that knowledge with the ones who have the time travel. So then you have like those people who have the time travel and who have an idea what they should be doing in the post, which is probably three things: find the person who is immune in the past and make use of that person while they have time. Find out more about what exactly attacked them and try to prevent it from happening, and prepare for the case that they can't prevent the attack, that this time at least they are better equipped with dealing with it. So that's the plan that they have. At 8, 7, the two plot lines have come together where they have the time travel and they have the immune person. Does the immune person, so the chosen one, does that person have to still be alive? It could be, that could be the conflict resolution of the subplot, right? That at 7, basically they found this immune person and they tried to bring it back to someone who knows something. So that would probably be people who also know about the time travel now. So kind of like the most organized people that are still alive. So like the new resistance. And they want to bring that immune person there and lose that person just before they make it there. That could be interesting, right? And because they obviously don't know that there is time travel, they feel like they failed. But it just, yeah. Okay, so let's say that's the resolution. So I'm working backwards here to create the subplot. That could be interesting because this chosen one person is immune to whatever is affecting people, but he's obviously not immune to being killed by normal stuff. So that's really just, they had like this whole plot line of trying to get this person to safety, and then at the last moment they failed. And then everything seems lost until they make it back to the other people who have the time travel, and then they can combine basically their experiences into a new hope. Okay, so getting back to the actual resistance and telling them that there was an immune person, does that happen at 7 or at 8? It makes sense that that happens at 8, right? So we had like kind of like this all is lost moment, and then going to the next, there's a change between that and then the next point. So the subplot ties back in by the climax. I have that, right? So it happens just before 8. Then the resolution must affect the main plot. That's also the case. Now they have a plan what they have to do in the past because of it. Then there has to be a beginning, middle, and end. So at 7, they find take. Take was the moment where we have found some sort of solution and now we take it at great cost, right? So 5, they would find out that there is someone who's immune. At 6, they would do everything they can to protect this person at great cost to themselves. So whoever that is, that would be like the last surviving humans, probably also civilians who sort of grouped together. So let's have that happen here. And that's just like the rising conflict of the subplot, so rising stakes. So that would also make sense that at this point the fruit flies would actually specifically target this immune person. This way it's more dangerous and more dramatic, rather than if they didn't know, then they could just slip through. So that could be in here. And then at 5, it was basically finding out that there is someone who's immune. What is that? Is that the middle part? That's the turning point, right? For whoever. So say, what I know from the present storyline is the following. That when they get back in time, this chosen one is about 10 years old, something like that. Because here in the future storyline, he's about 30 years old, so an adult. But he would be surrounded probably by the people that he fled the city with, so family, parents. I like the idea of having a chosen one who in the future is completely useless. So someone who is immune but not trained in any way, not particularly good in a chaos situation. So someone who's just very normal, you know, kind of finds out by accident, by being kind of attacked or however it happens, that he is immune, but then not being able to make use of it because he doesn't know what he's doing, right? And by that definition, it could be interesting to also have other characters in this future storyline that in the present storyline are important. So because in the present storyline he's just 10 years old, the parents are very important figures. So they could be also part of whoever is trying to keep him safe. And then other people who could try to keep him safe could be the ones, you know, who make it to the end and meet the time travel people. Maybe some of them or one of them is even someone who can use the time travel ability, goes back in time and basically tells the people he meets there, the chosen one and his parents, who they were in the future, and kind of like, you know, acts as sort of, you know how often we have that in stories where it's basically like a time travel character already met someone in the future and then comes back and is in awe. Kind of like some sort of that scenario, but in the reverse, because they wouldn't be in awe because in the future that person was such a useless, probably very annoying idiot. That would be also kind of fun to have a completely annoying, stupid, worst person for the job kind of chosen one. I really like that approach. So that could be part of the subplot. So in the subplot we meet characters that later in the present storyline become important characters. So this is the midpoint change, right? And then the beginning of the subplot would be at the point where you wouldn't want to start the subplot too early, right? You don't want to start the subplot at 1, because at 1 the reader is still getting to know the world in general and the main conflict. So you want to set up the world, the main conflict, and then at 2 it's basically the stakes, kind of what the characters should be doing, setting that up as well. Still, you see a lot of questions that I had that are kind of questions that are relevant for the entire story. So for example, what exactly are these creatures isn't answered here in this future storyline, right? It's the real nature of the threat is actually only answered in the present storyline. But even if I said this was a standalone story, right, then I would only answer this towards the end of the story. So that's why there are overarching questions that are really the driving points, I think, for why the reader would stick with the story to begin with. They kind of get a question in the beginning and they're like, I don't really care about that story, but there's some weird creature. Where did it come from? How come humans are turning into that? You know, kind of like that question. And then they would stick around, even if the rest of the story, even if the characters aren't necessarily that interesting, they would probably still be somewhat engaged with the question. And maybe they just skip to the very end to get the answer and then they can move on. But I find that very much myself when it comes to these kind of stories. When I get specific kind of questions in the beginning, I really like the whole mystery aspect, and especially there's something strange happening and you don't really know what it is, you just see the effects of it. I really like those kind of premises, and then that's exactly what I do. When I don't like the rest of the story or the characters, I at least try to get the answer to the initial question. So that's a bit why 2 already has so much to do, so it doesn't make sense to also set up a subplot here. So here the subplot would start once the initial human reaction is basically trying to keep those creatures locked up and stopping it from spreading it further, right? Kind of like just containing it. And then when it gets out, that's basically at 4, that's the changing point in the main conflict where it's starting to become clear that they're fighting a smart enemy and the humans are on retreat. That would be the starting point for the subplot. This is when the civilians now have to flee the city. So setting, and that could be that you know, you remember that thing that I said about wanting to have different characters for each viewpoint, so that it's basically an ongoing story that tells the entire human story through different character experiences. Here, the subplot introduction could be a viewpoint of a civilian fleeing, which ties into the effects of what happens when the human's first response fails and gives us a sense of why that is a bad thing, right? Kind of like thrown into the real drama of the situation and introducing the subplot there. So that would happen at 4 in plot line 2. Yeah. Okay. So basically here, introduction to the subplot beginning. Okay, so that's the introduction to the subplot. Basically a bunch of civilian characters showing us the chaos of the evacuation, trying to leave the city. And we are actually sticking with some of these characters for the subplot. I have to figure out how to tie that in with the changing viewpoints. Maybe jump into the viewpoint of each of the supporting characters that are important in the present storyline. I really like the idea of having at least once the chosen one viewpoint, but that's something that I have to figure out later, especially once I have the characters. So right now, let's just go with this. I have a beginning, I have a middle, and I have an end to the subplot.
To the main plot antagonist. This is a character that adds more obstacles for your protagonist, but ends up mentally or physically strengthening your character for the final showdown with the main antagonist. Keep in mind, this secondary antagonist can't take over the main antagonist's degree of opposition to the story. They're a hurdle, an exercise to help your character get ready for the climax.
I'm confused. Very confused. How do you do that? So, in what story do you have a secondary... I get what she means, right? It's basically the idea that you train up your protagonist so that they can fight the final boss, basically. So, probably then you do like the same approach as you would in a video game, where it's basically you have like the secondary antagonist is kind of like the antagonist of this level, and the main antagonist is the overall one. So it's like you defeat the Team Rocket, and then once you defeated several Team Rocket members, then you go to the final boss, and then you have defeated the entire organization, kind of like that. But how do you do that in different kind of stories? So subplot is not my topic. I'm confused. I don't know how you would do that. I don't know if I could tie that into my story, or if I want to. I think I'm already too much in there. Maybe. Okay, actually, that could be an interesting idea. What do you think of this? What if in the subplot, the chosen one gets specifically targeted by one creature or whatever that noticed that he's immune, and that's the creature that keeps following him and his group and in the end kills him before he can make it to the protection of the other humans. And yeah, okay. And then in this version, in the future version, he would have been killed by this particular person or creature, whatever. And later in the present storyline, we will come across that particular creature antagonist again in some way. And this time maybe it's a different outcome. And the overall antagonist would be all the creatures together, right? Kind of like species versus species, humans versus fruit flies. So, okay, that could be actually interesting. I'm not sure if that's... it's a starting point and it made the subplot more interesting. Okay, fair enough, I take it back. That was actually a cool idea. And then also the introduction of antagonist X could happen here also at 5, where it's basically... because chosen one is attacked, it could have just started like a normal attack, and then the chosen one turns out immune and doesn't turn or whatever, and then this is basically the one who attacked him was the antagonist X, or was at least there to witness it, and that's what set this antagonist on his tracks. So, okay. So, actually, now I'm extending the challenge, so that now that I could include this second point, I'm trying to include all the suggestions she has for how to start the subplot. So the other thing was, what is your protagonist's relationship like with their family? Like I said, I like the idea of having a chosen one who's really obnoxious. So let's have a chosen one who is beginning. Chosen one is obnoxious, useless, and sponging of his. That could explain why this gives me the way to introduce the parents also in the future storyline, because this chosen one character is basically in the future storyline. They are together because maybe he lives at home, maybe he sponges off his parents. It's kind of like supposed to be an obnoxious, useless kind of person, so that we have a sort of character arc, and also like the contrast between him being very much this kind of person and also having the most important ability in the world, so kind of like the last person you would want it to have. So, so that could be set up here, kind of obnoxious, useless, sponsor of his parents, and we have relationship very strained. And here, this is also obviously trying to include this whole family drama here with the relationship between the characters, but also giving them some more depth, some more conflict that explains who the characters are, so that we would ideally get more attached to these characters already here and more interested in seeing them again in the present storyline. And then another real contrast that I would like to see is that from what I already know in the present storyline, there's a very strong relationship between the chosen one and his parents, very close, and that could be kind of like contrasted here in the future storyline, where it's a very fractured one, and then because obviously in the present storyline things are completely different in terms of how he's brought up and having like this overall mission or whatever, it could be the complete opposite, right? So I like that as a sort of extra element, just to give the characters more depth and kind of give them more personality, maybe to bounce off each other. And then there could also be another element here in the subplot to make it more dramatic, to basically have, once it turns out that this person is immune, the parents are also trying to protect him. Probably not just because he is immune, but that could be an additional element that he's being hunted down, right, because he's immune, and that gets one or both of his parents killed in this version. So that's also another element here. Seeing this version here, where basically this chosen one, like we said, he's very useless, can't be relied upon to react when something happens, that he kind of like not the person to have in a panic situation, someone who freezes up maybe. So that very much the person who goes back in time and meets this chosen one has like a very fixed idea of who this person is in the future, and then in the present storyline they worked very consciously against that, you know, and kind of like try very hard to train up this person so that they don't end up at this same point. So there's a lot of option there for giving the characters more stakes and making it more personal. I am really surprised that this works this well, combining this, like these starting points. Maybe this is just now a lucky accident that I, you know, because I have this very, the whole subplot general idea that I had was very generic, right? So you can fill in a lot of stuff. And also the family element was always there, because the whole present storyline is very much about looking at the dynamic within a family when you have like this traditional chosen one story, but trying to put it in a realistic setting and more of a actually horrific look at how that would affect the family, rather than just being kind of like this idea of having like this savior character. It's very much a strain on the parents, and kind of like a constant worry of knowing that the future is this huge conflict and potentially the end of the world and stuff like that, kind of like that. So that, because I already had this family element, it worked very much here. I would be interested if you are following along as well, and if you are doing it as well, that you're trying to incorporate these elements. Does it work as well for you, or is it too much, and does it become too complicated and not really feels like it's in line with the main conflict anymore?
Romantic subplots are likely the most popular subplot to have ever been called a subplot. Your character already has so much going on right now, and now may not be the time to fall in love, but guess what? It's time, buddy. More drama, more tension, more stakes. Romance changes the game and can change what your character believes is important. It can turn best friends against each other, or it can be the motivational impetus for the protagonist to stand up for what they really believe in. It can be good, or it can be bad.
I prefer it when it's bad, usually, because a problem that I have when it comes to romantic subplots in many stories is that I always feel like if you have like, let's say you have like this supernatural setup of a story, and in this world you have like this conflict because of the supernatural creatures, but there's a very strong romantic subplot. There's a strong chance that the reader doesn't care about any of the supernatural stuff. They like it as a sort of world building element, and making the romantic plot points more dramatic because of the supernatural elements. But they skip all the world building, they skip all the other conflict, and they just go to the romantic plot points. And then it always feels like the subplot is very much taking away all the attention of what you would have wanted to be your main plot. And in those cases, it's really the best idea to just admit to yourself that you're telling a romantic story, make that the main plot, and just use the supernatural stuff as the world building. So when it comes to romantic subplots, I always think it's actually the hardest thing to do right, because they have such a strong attraction and such a strong audience that likes it, that if you combine it with a very strong but different sort of main plot, it could basically destroy all the attraction that the main plot has, because just the romantic element is so much stronger and so much more addictive. But that, again, something that I would be very interested in knowing if you also feel like that, or what kind of subplots do you feel are the hardest to do? Personally, I always feel that if you have a very strong mystery element in the main plot, you should probably reconsider if you really want to have a romantic subplot as well, especially if you can't completely trust yourself that you can pull it off. That's just, my opinion. But I have to include this now. Okay, so like I said, I like the idea of it being a negative. So we said that this chosen one is basically obnoxious, useless, and an idiot. So let's let the idiot fall in love in the worst moment. So basically that's what could get him killed. I'm liking this idea a bit too much, sorry. But that could be basically everyone around him was trying to keep him safe for the last two, kind of like turning points. The entire subplot was about getting him to the resistance safely so that they can make use of whatever immunity he has. And just before they manage to do that, he somehow ends up sacrificing himself, not necessarily voluntarily, so it shouldn't be like a heroic sacrifice, although that could also be kind of not sure yet if he does it on purpose or just kind of like accidentally. But I like the idea of him trying to be the hero and getting killed because of that. Question is, what happens to the love interest? Either they die anyway, so it was all for nothing. That could be like the tragic thing. Although I feel that would resonate much more if it would stick, because obviously at the next changing point we basically find out that there's another chance in the present. So it would make more sense that this love interest actually goes back in time as well in some way, or dies at the end there. Not sure what to do with the love interest yet. To do with this character. Maybe this character can be a viewpoint character so that we have a front row seat to having the chosen one being killed. Or we could be in the viewpoint of the chosen one when he does the stupid thing. But then I feel it's a bit... That's also a question to answer probably tomorrow when we come to character is, do I want to be in the mindset of the chosen one? Because then I have an explanation for why he does what he does. It's easier to explain away idiocy if you yourself see the reasoning behind it. Or do I want to see it from the outside so that it is just basically someone being stupid and you have to watch it? We'll come back to that. Okay, but yeah, I like the idea of him falling in love at the worst time.
Back up. This is a relationship that started before our main story takes place, but comes back to bite the main character, in the butt. This can be family, it could be a jilted lover, a childhood bully, a dog that always chases your main character out of the neighborhood for some reason. It could be anything. This type of character, or animal, or thing really, because it could also be a ghost for all I know, serves to show us a glimpse of your protagonist's past, which brings a deeper meaning to what's happening right now. And the timing in your main character's life is key here. This thing didn't come back as an issue until your character started on the main story's journey. It wasn't a problem before, but now it is. This represents...
Okay, this one I got because of the present storyline and what I know there. So what I do know from the present storyline is that before the time travel agents, whatever, arrive, the chosen one was someone, he's still a child, who wasn't necessarily bullied, but he was more like an outsider. So kind of like a child who, you know, when they start kindergarten and then school, has a lot of trouble making friends, someone who isn't very good in the school system because he doesn't think in that way. So his intelligence, especially in the present storyline, because he's trained up, is very much kind of like movement. You know, he's someone who learns to act without thinking, but has strong reflexes and stuff like that, but isn't necessarily someone who is made for the strict school system with the whole learning and sitting still and stuff like that. So I kind of like the idea that here in this version, in this future storyline, when we first meet the character, we said basically he's someone who's useless and someone who's very sponging of his parents and stuff, but that's him at 30, right? And as a younger child, he had problems basically with building up confidence and self-esteem because of this whole school system that always told him that he's an idiot to some degree. So there's obviously some character issues in terms of behavior issues that were mostly trained up on him, right? That he was kind of learning from the environment that he was in. So this lack of confidence could be a factor, right? That's kind of like, so when she says something from the past creeping up, I like the idea of it being some sort of, that being the element of the character wound, the character flaw, right? Kind of like that whole insecurity or the lie that they believe, something like that. So how about we take that element and we shelf it for now and look at it again once. Tomorrow I want to develop character, so I'll look at that again tomorrow, and when it comes to the wound of the character.
Another flaw or disabling emotion, and how can you balance that? Add contrasting emotion in a subplot, both to give the reader a break and to highlight the prevalent emotion without going overboard, the main one that you want to focus on. Are you writing a dark, scary book? Add some romance or comedic relief. Are you writing a family drama? Add a hint of horror or a relationship that's totally drama-free and easy.
Again, I feel like I have that because the overall story is that of horror to some degree, more kind of like mystery, thriller, anticipation, horror. We don't know what the creatures are, we don't know what they want, blah, blah, blah. And then the subplot, like I said, is very family focused, very much the family conflict. And it's not necessarily supposed to be funny, but I do think that especially the chosen one character should have, like I said before, the idea is to make him obnoxious and stuff, but not in the sense that you should, as the reader, really dislike him, because he's just, it should be more like one of those people that they're so obnoxious, but they still have charm because they are very much themselves. So it's definitely a character, right? And maybe from that there could be some comedic elements, but I don't think it couldn't be that different in terms of tone in that case. So just horror in terms of the overall main plot and family drama with the subplot, which is also probably a good contrast to just see the effects on the whole world and then making it more personal in the subplot by watching one family and how they are affected. What are my favorite subplots? I do definitely like subplots that tell you more about a secondary character. Like I said, it's not that I don't like romantic subplots, I do like them, but I always feel the funny thing is if they're done really well, the subplot themselves, the romantic subplot, my attention is always more on the subplot than it is on the main plot, because I just feel it's so hard to have a main plot that is as engaging as a really well done romantic subplot, because the romantic subplots naturally they have those addictive elements of highs and lows, and just kind of like they naturally create endorphins in the reader, right? How do you counteract such a strong feeling in one subplot with the main plot? How do you create an even stronger feeling in the main plot? Yeah, this is something that I really didn't get right away, the whole how to have a secondary antagonist. But now that I thought through it, it's actually a really cool idea to make. Before it was just like this thing happens, but it's not really a conscious thing. It's just that he happened to be attacked and then turned out immune. And now it's very much like a personal, this is sort of almost kind of like a Terminator thing that keeps following him and won't leave him alone just because he's immune, which makes it creepier and scarier and more engaging, I feel. Mysterious subplots. That would be also cool. Do you have an example of a mysterious subplot? I can't really think of a subplot where it's like the mystery in the subplot and not in the overall plot, but I would be really interested in seeing how that is done. Or is it just like the main plot is mystery and the subplot has an additional mystery? Okay, then I would get it, yeah. If the entire story is all mysteries and then you have like a subplot that answers a specific sub-question. Okay, but yeah, I think we're through here. I liked the video. I had problems applying it. I think that was pretty obvious. It's not really clear how to tie in the subplot with the main plot unless you already naturally kind of arrived there, I think. So if you come up with a subplot, most likely you came up with a subplot because it's an element that came from the main plot and then the natural connection is already there. And otherwise, the only thing that I could think of trying to create that, if you don't naturally have it, is to just start with the conflict of the main plot. As I already announced, now the next thing that I want to do is look at characters, start developing the characters, and you can go and watch this video if you want to do the same thing. Ciao.